Hey there, writer. Plot Dude here. Let's talk for a minute about how you plan your stories. Now, you probably heard terms like plotter and pantser, but those are just labels. They're kind of the tip of the iceberg. And you've even heard those terms from me. And I've said whether I'm a plotter or a planner or a pantser or whatever. But the truth is, a lot of times I blend those two things in kind of a mishmash type thing that allows me to tell whichever story the way it wants to be told. There's a lot of ways to plan a story, and most writers are a mix, or they're different type of planners at different times, or really sometimes depending upon how the story idea comes to them or the character idea comes to them. So today we're going to break down five main types of writer planners, but these are by no means the only ones. In fact, the way you plan your stories is an individual as you are a writer. Okay, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. You don't have to choose just one of these. In fact, most of us don't. That's the beauty of it. So, type number one is the plotter. This is one that you may be one of the most familiar ones. You love outlines, beat sheets, knowing exactly where you're headed before you start. You have a detailed outline. It's like planning a road trip with the GPS and snacks and every stop mapped out on Google Maps or something like that. Plotters tend to write cleaner first drafts normally because they've already mapped out the journey. But sometimes, if the map is too tight, the story can feel a little stiff and forced, or your creativity can even feel constrained. And that's why some people don't even like the term plotter, let alone to be labeled as one. Okay, well, the good news is you don't have to be. There's also another type that I've found, and this is the wanderer, or what we normally would call a discovery writer. This means you just start writing with a vague idea and you just wander across the landscape wondering maybe where you're going, even what you're doing. You're getting to know the characters as you write the story. There's no outline, there's no plan, just discovery. It's spontaneous, surprising, always super creative. You end up rewriting more most of the time, and sometimes you end up throwing out a lot of what you wrote the first time, but sometimes that produces a better story and a more character-rich story. And in those revisions, you can be truly creative, get to know your characters better, and to actually tell their story in a more accurate way. So sometimes that's just the way you are. But some people enjoy rewriting more than they enjoy the actual drafting process. And that's kind of unusual. It's not really, I enjoy rewriting as well and revisions as well, but not because I wander, but because I usually have a mix of wandering and plotting mixed into there. And that's where the third type comes in. That's the hybrid type. It's somewhere in the middle. So maybe you outline the first act and then you wing the rest. Maybe you wing the first part of the book and then you know where you're going. You start to know your characters better. So you outline the last half of the book. Maybe you pants the entire first draft, then go back and reverse engineer the structure once you've written your initial, what I would call more of a zero draft. Hybrids are really flexible. You pivot and you change when the story needs it, when the idea needs it. This is what I'm more like most of the time, is I'm more of a hybrid. Sometimes I write to an outline pretty strictly. Sometimes I discover the story and even new characters as I go. And then I go back and do the revisions to make sure that that all hits the right kind of structure, hits the right kind of beats, and things like that. Now, there's also the mosaic builder. The mosaic builder is more like someone putting together a puzzle. So maybe they start with the edge pieces. Maybe they just find whichever pieces fit. They don't necessarily write things in order. They just write a piece at a time and then put those puzzle pieces together into a book. Now, this is actually the way my first novel ever that was any kind of a success was kind of put together. I had several pieces in different places and I pulled those all together into a coherent story. Voila, you have a novel, right? That's a mosaic builder. A lot of people do this. I have a hard time now. I tend to write more linearly now that I've developed as a writer, but it doesn't mean that writing as a mosaic writer all the time and having different puzzle pieces laying all over the place and then putting them together is at all wrong. In fact, it's a perfectly valid way to write a story. And sometimes that happens. Okay. And sometimes you end up with a better story because even if you have extra scenes, they never actually really make it into the final draft. So it makes for a better story. Okay. The fifth type is the sculptor. Okay. The sculptor is the type that, hey, you've got a hammer, you got a chisel, you're kind of bringing stuff all together. You're kind of finding out what's inside that lump of clay that you created, and you're just chipping away all the pieces that don't fit. So sometimes you draft the whole thing, it's messy, sometimes even unreadable. There's different files, different places, different pages, different places. Maybe you wrote it out of order, maybe you kind of wrote it in order, but now you decided you need to change the order. You're just not afraid to throw whatever you want at the wheel, using the sculptor analogy, or throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, and the rest of it, hey, you're perfectly comfortable with throwing that away. That is an awesome way to write a book, and lots of people do that. Some people write in chunks, some people write the whole thing together, some people write in sprints, some people write in blurbs, some people, write really quickly, some people take longer to write. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you put your draft together. Now, there are some advantages to drafting quickly. There's some advantages to blending some of these different ways to plan a story. There are a bunch of different ways to write stories, and there isn't necessarily a right one. So the first thing to ask yourself is, which one of these are you now? Now, I have a special tool. I'll drop a link to it in the description below, and it's a quiz that'll help you decide what kind of planner you are right now. But coming very soon, I have an entire course, and the whole idea of the course is to be a choose your own adventure that you can probably take several times during your writing career. And the reason is, as your planning type develops, you might need different tools and different ideas of how to approach things to make it work better for you. Or maybe you just want to blend some of those types. So you want to choose your way through this course, choose the things that resonate with how you plan your stories and the things that you need to learn right now. And then you can come back and look at the whole picture, look at everything together at some other time. So it's almost a choose your own adventure course. You can choose to be a plotter all the way. You can choose to be a plotter part of the way and a sculptor the last part of the way, whatever you want, because your writing process is only yours, and you don't have to write the way anyone tells you is the right way to do it. So take a look at that link in the description below. Take that quiz, find out what kind of planner you are right now, and then join me in the course. And we'll figure out together your unique path to crafting your story. The number one thing that this course does is helps you finish. The most important thing you can do is finish that first draft. Then everything else depends upon that. So let's get to work. Let's get finishing and start by finding out what type of planner you are. With that, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.